Hello everyone, I'm here today to do my November wrap-up, and in November I read 10 books, but it was quite a tough month, so I read 5 books in the first week and then 5 books in the rest of the month. Yeah, it has been a rough month. I'm looking forward to November being over, but we will see how we continue. Hopefully December gets a little bit better, but yeah, let's just talk about the books. That's what we're here for. The first book that I finished in November is The Once and Future Witches by Alix and Harrow, and I read this for a book club. It's a fantasy novel following 3 sisters that are involved in the suffragist movement, and they kind of want to bring witchcraft back. And in this world, magic is more of a thing that you just decide that it's gonna come back and then you do it, and it's kind of hinting at the magic of womanhood and sisterhood rather than actual magic, although there's actual magic, but a lot of it's just old recipes of things and stuff like that. I found it I like the message, but I think it was very on the nose. There was no subtlety to this book, and I also found that the world, not the world building, but because it's in our world, but it was not very immersive, because the way that the characters talked was not like the time that this is supposed to be set in. This is supposed to be set in 1893, and they read current characters, stuff like that. It was not super engaging. There was also the characters were very two-dimensional, so I didn't find this particularly thrilling or anything. I like the message, but I think other books have done it better than this. The second book I read was Red Is My Heart by Antoine Laurain, and this was a proof copy that I got from NetGalley, so thank you NetGalley. And I like this. This was it was a mixed media sort of stuff, so there were a lot of drawings and pictures and things like that, and the actual text, it was mostly poetry as well, so it was kind of you could read it in an hour or two, but it was nice. It was about this man that was going through a breakup, and kind of the everyday feelings of the breakup, and how sometimes it just hurts in the most unconventional moments, stuff like that. I thought it was well done, and I enjoyed it for what it was. The next book that I read was Salt Slow by Julia Armfield, and I like Julia Armfield's writing style, but this is short stories, and it doesn't matter if I like the author or not. Short stories are just not enough for me to bite into, and so I end up getting lost in them, and this was no different. So, yeah, I like some of them. Some of them were creepy, but overall they just don't appeal to me. The next book that I finished was Stoneyard Devotional by Charlotte Wood, and this is about a woman that decides to move into this convent, more out of trying to run away from her burnout and her busy life in the city, rather than any religious circumstance. It's actually very very clear that that's not something that she's interested in, and there are weird things happening there that make her reevaluate her choices in many ways. I thought it was good. I liked the narrative style. It was very conversational and very casual in many ways, and I also liked the point that it was trying to make about our lives and the metaphors around how we have developed to live our lives in these stressful, meaningless kind of scenarios. But yeah, it was good. It was good. It was not brilliant for me, but it was good. The next book that I finished was The Wind in the Willows by Kenneth Grahame, and this was very cute. This is kind of a children's book with a bunch of animals and the shenanigans they get into. I found that the writing was very beautiful and the descriptions of nature was very beautiful. I thought that the story was a little bit lacking, but overall it was a nice short little read. The next book that I finished was Strong Female Character by Fern Brady. This is Fern Brady is a comedian in the UK, and she was diagnosed with autism as an adult, and she's trying to make sense of all the things that she didn't understand when she was younger, and of her life and her parents and all of those stuff, and how she ended up where she ended up. It was very funny, it was very well researched. I was curious about her afterwards, so I looked her up. I'm not sure if her comedy is for me, but still I really enjoyed this book. I thought it was very well written and non-self-deprecating in any way, but also showing the struggles with living with autism. So I thought it was very good. The next book that I finished was The Art of Gathering, How We Meet and Why It Matters by Priya Parker. I read this for a book club as well, and this was not the book for me. It was very corporate, it was very privileged in the way that it was talking about how to make meetings more meaningful. For example, she had an example where she said, well, the place where you do the meeting really matters. So in this and this instance, you probably should just go to a cabin in the middle of the city side. And that's obviously a very privileged thing to say, but even in smaller things, the way that you're supposed to like prepare everything with so much detail and set down the rules for everyone else to be comfortable, I think kind of ignores the fact that that takes a lot of work and that takes a lot of energy from people to do those rules. And so in that sense, it comes from a very privileged position of having that time and that energy to put those boundaries in place and think through all of the little things of a meeting, which of course it's gonna make the meeting better, but sometimes you just want to hang out, right? And this book didn't leave space for low-key stuff, and it kind of looked down upon low-key meetings. Yeah, there are some things I will take from the book that I can apply to the way I meet, and there has been a meeting idea in my mind for a while. I want to organize some sort of breakfast situation with other parents in my neighborhood, and I will take some of this advice into that, but overall as a book I think it was not for me. The next book that I finished was The Strength of the Few by Islington. This is the second book in the Hierarchy series. The first one is The Will of the Many, and this kind of picks up directly from where the first one left, and we follow the same character but in a different kind of time of his life. He has finished school, the academy, and now he's trying to figure out his work situation, and this one, it also expands the world a lot more. At the end of the first book, something happened that already suggested that, and here we explore that in more detail. I think it was not as good as the first one for me. I think it was too convoluted, and I think it was the characters didn't grow as much, we didn't get to know the characters as much, and so for me this didn't work as well as the first one. However, this month I have been in a state of mind that did not allow for this level of complexity in a world, and so I would be curious to reading this when I have more time and more space, mind space, to dedicate to it and see if I like it better or if it's indeed just too convoluted for the sake of being too convoluted. I am still interested in continuing with the series, this one is not my favorite. The next book in the list is The Mermaid of Black Conch by Monique Roffey, and this is the story of a fisherman. I think it's in around the slave trade, or at least it's like a metaphor for the slave trade. Basically this man finds this mermaid, and then he falls in love with her, and the more they are together, the more she becomes a person. And yeah, as I said, it's a metaphor for the slave trade. It was uncomfortable at parts because it's narrated from the man's point of view, and the way that he sees this mermaid woman, whatever, it's very uncomfortable at times, but I think that's intentional. So I think it's well done. I just don't think it was a particularly enjoyable experience for me reading this. And then the last book that I finished this month is Endling by Reva, which is again another book for a book club, and I think this was I enjoyed it. I think the writing style is very unique. It's bordering on pretentious, but it's so unique that I think I somehow enjoyed it, and it plays with form a lot. It's for example, it has the about the author note on type sort of situation in the middle of the book rather than at the end, and it kind of follows this parallel situation. The first thing that it follows is these three women that are very involved in the bridal business in Ukraine, so all these pure brides from Ukraine that are like exported, if for lack of a better word, to other places, and one of them is also obsessed with snails, very rare snails that are in Ukraine. So the way that she's funding that, her research on that, is by this bridal business, and the other two have something to revenge from, so they are also in this business sort of undercover, and as the book progresses things get crazier and crazier, and at the same time we are following kind of this writer that is going to Ukraine to research for a book about a woman obsessed with the snails in Ukraine, and the bridal situation in Ukraine. And while all of these things are happening, then in the middle of the book we also have the war starting. So there are a lot of little pieces. I think it was very well done and very well crafted. I'm not sure it was the most engaging of reads and the most mesmerizing of reads, but I think it was like from a one step removed sort of situation. I think this was very, very well done, and I have a lot of admiration for what this book was doing. So in that sense, I think this was very good. So those are all the books that I read in the month of November. For the month of December, I basically just have a bunch of library books that I need to read before they are due back. The first one that I'm going to start with, because I have to read it, is The Ministry of Time by Kellen Bradley. I don't know much about this other than it's speculative fiction, and it's supposed to be feminist. Then I have Alexei Navalny's Patriot, which is a memoir from Alexei Navalny, which is or was an activist in Russia, and he was murdered, he was poisoned. So I think the end of the book is written by his widow about what happened to him. And I have heard really good things about this, and I'm really interested into it. And then I have two books, The Heart Goes Last by Margaret Atwood, which I think it's like sci-fi dystopian stuff, like a lot of Atwood is. And sometimes you just need something comforting and familiar, and maybe Margaret Atwood is not comforting and familiar for most of people, but there is an aspect of it for me into her writing. And then the last one is A Heart So White by Javier Marias, which is Javier Marias is a Spanish writer, and I would have preferred to read this in Spanish, but my library had it in English, so I'm reading it in English. And this is kind of like a family mystery sort of drama situation, and again, it sounds good. We will see how it goes. And then the last one that I don't have yet, I have to go to pick it up in the library, that I need to read is Bringing Down the Duke, which is a romance, supposed to be a feminist romance, and it's for my book club, so that's what we are reading in December. So those are the main books that I need to read in December, and I think I'm going to be trying to read as much of my ancient TBR as possible, so that when January starts I have as little as possible from the books that I bought this year, but we will see how that goes. Let me know if you're reading something special in December, or if you've read something interesting in November, or you have thoughts about any of these books, and until next video, bye!